Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. But, hey, it's another Wednesday. How's everyone doing?
Yeah, wonderful. Hey, are our images all just on the left, or can everyone see us right now? I'm still getting used to the platform.
There we go.
Perfect.
That makes more sense.
Good
well,
stuff.
Brody likes to see himself front and center all the time. He said the ego on that guy, I tell you, it comes from his jumping out of helicopters.
Yes.
Are you implying some kind of brain damage? Is that what you're implying?
I wasn't, but I will from now on.
Yeah, that's
There's
how I
definitely
see it.
been brain damage. Definitely brain damage on this end. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, man, it's hump day, and this is one of the few times I'm actually ready for the weekend. Had a good week. Friday went up, and I ran from Detroit into Canada and turned around and came back.
Wow, they let you in?
God,
They chased you out.
that's a long way to chase someone.
So I think you guys know I went to my national convention on my health nonprofit, and we ran the Detroit Free Press half marathon and marathon.
Wow.
And it's cold.
Yeah.
It is. It is cold.
Cold being relative since I'm here in the South, but oh my dude, we came out of the tunnel when you come back in, that wind jumped on my back. And because when you go through the tunnel, you get to warm up a little bit, and the sweat comes out, and then next thing you know, you got and that wind just chills you to the bone.
I'd honestly rather jump out of a helicopter, Ed. I gotta be honest.
Yeah.
It was pretty good. Lots of folks showed up, great events, good awards. I'll share some pictures with you, Brody and Rod.
I think I saw one earlier, a picture of Frank. That was a picture of Frank, right?
Yeah, I thought that you was just like Frank.
It did.
So that
I've
guy.
I've never seen Frank run, so I don't know what that looks like.
Oh, it definitely was a joke. It was a dig. It wasn't factual. Frank probably runs to Chick-fil-A and back. That's it.
Now that's a run I can manage. That I can manage.
Yeah. Not doing too much of interesting stuff this week. I think Rod, you saw me hit you up with questions about the availability of a certain parser. It's showing up in private preview for the ASIM, but in the Git it's not there. So to our listeners, we're trying to get access to the Sentinel parser for DACP, and the it's listed in the docs as part of the current ASIM, but when you go to Git, the DACP parser doesn't exist, and I'm trying to figure out why would you even want that. I mean, if you're not hosting DACP as part of an IPAM or something internally, don't think you can. If someone's on your network and they're attacking your DACP, what they're going to do is exhaustion attacks, where they just take your
other
pool.
Problems. Yeah.
Yeah.
If that's your only indication that they're on your network, then you have bigger problems.
I think the only thing that you could probably do if you're sophisticated is go into DACP. Inside the name server, you could put your domain there, right, and put the other two below it.
Yeah, you could set the lease to like milliseconds or something.
the shortest that they'd have it, and then and put it at the top, but still leave the domain controllers as the secondary, and then leave the other domain controller as that. But if I was attacker, you can keep DACP. I want to go out to your internal DNS, and I become authority. I start sending stuff to me now.
That's not a serious attack. That's a prank.
That's a prank.
Yeah.
Well, the customer said they want it. They want to be able to parse DACP stuff. So the only other thing I can think of is a company that does a lot of mergers and acquisitions. They haven't quite merged, but I still wouldn't. Yeah, you can forward the DACP logs over, and then you can parse them. But
so I reached out to Ofer about that, by the way. I'm waiting for Ofer to get back with me on availability on GitHub.
The Oprah?
Not Oprah.
OFAR. far asleep. It's 6,
No,
7,
he
8,
was-
9, 10,
No,
11, 12,
last
1,
time I looked, he was still awake. I don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, it's like 12 in the morning where he is. 1 o'clock in the morning. And what's the other thing I pinged you about? Customers trying to get some understanding around the general availability of repositories. I'm still going to pick your brain on that. I'm a little lost on that about what they're trying to do. They're trying to manipulate some JSON for I don't know. So I got to get more. I got to get more information. I don't know.
Ed, you're kind of hilarious this week. Seems like you're asleep, bud. You doing okay?
I gotta go with Ed here. The past couple weeks have just been murderously busy. I mean, my brain is fried for some reason,
I'm kind of in the same boat.
And it's just middle of October, right?
Yeah.
We have.
Now, is this because summer was chill and now we're getting back to normal and we're just not used to it?
No, it's because everybody's trying to do everything before the end of November, where everybody at Microsoft just disappears for 2 months.
Right.
And especially the vertical I cover, retail, when they go into change freeze, 1st of November.
Yeah, that's right.
Change freeze, nobody's touching anything. Yeah, that'll get you fired at places that sell nails or soda or pop or clothes. You make a change that affects e-commerce, you're done.
Yeah, we usually see an uptick on the IR side as well post summer. I think a lot of people just ignore red flags that start popping up through the summer, and then when they get back to work, when the kids go back to school, they're like, "Oh yeah, we should probably deal with this quackbot infection we've been pretending is not here for the last 3 months."
Yeah. Well, and summer at the Black Sea is very nice.
Mm-hmm. And then a lot of people are preparing for budget, right? Most people, calendar year is also their fiscal year. And so they're preparing for budget. So they're trying to determine, okay, does our software work or not? What do we need? We need to budget for, if it's not Sentinel, obviously need to budget for more hardware and all that good kind of stuff. But
I haven't reviewed any or view any of the Ignite videos, but I'll take the list that Brody gave and I'll go look at them. But I did get someone sent the book of business, so look through that a little bit.
I have a session tomorrow on one of those post-Ignite stuff for federal, talking about all the Ignite announcements for security. So,
would Jeff be with you? Sluggenberger? Okay.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, probably.
I was working on him on something. We were trying to perfect this attack script that will set off NDI alerts. So the first time it ran in my environment, I think I might have told you guys, Andrea Fisher and I were working on it. And shout out Andrea. She'll be on the podcast next month. It fired off MDE alerts because it installed Mimikat, started doing a bunch of stuff, changing permissions on administrative groups and critical groups. But MDI didn't have a clue. And I'm like, this was for. What? And this goes back to what I told you guys. My sensor was outdated. Remember, the sensor changed the NCAP, captured the WinPCAP. So you got to manually uninstall the sensor.
Right.
Manually being whatever means you do, GPO, Intune, however you do it. I did it manually. I only have 3 domain controllers in my lab. Then you download the new sensor. And I did it. And I forgot how I figured it out. Maybe I asked one of the MDI guys. But you're right. It still takes anywhere between 17 and 30 days to fully populate the backend database again. I'm like, wait, I don't know if it's still MongoDB. Have they moved over to Cosmos DB or whatever DB?
Do we communicate that when it has to be manual? There's no automatic way of doing it. And did we communicate that?
It's in the docs. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But it's in the docs is one thing, but did we proactively go out and communicate to customers that this was coming? Versus, hey, it's on the docs. You're not reading the docs every day?
If you go into MDI and you see a health alert, and you look at it, it tells you this is what is going on. Here's the link. And that's when I found out that, WinPCAP is not free. We're OEM in it.
You should pay for it.
Yeah, we're OEM in it to do in our product. So now I want to run this attack now that all my sensors are updated. And the minute you install the sensor, something else happens. The sensor installed, but you would think in the install, it would update the intelligence. It doesn't. So what it does, something in the Windows update prevented the sensor from doing it because my updates don't come out automatically. It'd been waiting on me 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Edward, come on.
Yeah, so I once I did the update, then I saw the sensor update. I'm like, okay, but then that may be the settings inside of it. Remember when you have MDI, you see the sensor and domain controllers, and you say, do you want automatic update, automatic reboot? I think it's turned off. Yeah, but that's all I had this week. I'm a slow old man. I'm not fast as Rod, so I can't beat him running. I guess I'll give a shot.
Never be fast as me. Never.
You'd be surprised.
Well, super quick before we get to the guests, the one major thing I'm working on this week is a customer wants to. We had a really good Defender for Endpoint engagement. They love it. Things are going great. They want to move on from X vendor and go MDE, but now they want to look at servers, right? And so we're having a conversation between, do we have kind of a more Defender for servers conversation, or do we get them into Defender for cloud? And they didn't want all the overhead right now. Overhead is kind of their phrasing. Like obviously Defender for cloud has a ton of capabilities, right? But what they're narrowly focused on is moving on from X other vendor in the spring to align with contract renewals, right? And they're like, yeah, we were looking at Defender for Endpoint Plan 1, Plan 2, and we proposed Defender for Cloud, and I'm at this quagmire. I'm like, man, I really want to get them on Defender for Cloud, but it's just going to be the threat protection side of things. They're really not too worried about anything related to vulnerability management or assessments or application control or none of that. It's really the threat protection element. How would you guys approach that? Would you try to still push for Defender for Cloud? It's all on-prem. They have their own data centers. They don't have any IaaS in Azure or other public clouds right now. So we told them about Azure Arc, need to extend that capability. But how would you two approach that? Because I think it would be hard to move them later, wouldn't it?
No, I just had the conversation. I was about to ask that very question. Where do the assets reside? If they're primarily on premise, it's not so much of the technology, it's the mindset of the customer. They're used to this.
Yeah.
So telling me I have to install a management overlay and then the endpoint protection.
Fair.
If you wanted to do it from MDC, but if you just deploy it via MDE, GPO, Intune, you could do it manually stripped. If you got servers, you don't want to do it 10 at a time. I would go that route, and then you can always go back and put Arc on it later, but let them get used to the nuances in the costing by deploying maybe 1 or 2 VMs. Because remember, one of my feedbacks about Defender for Cloud was you can't individually choose servers. You enable the subscription, and every server in that subscription, based on which slide
I forgot about that. I thought you could do a la carte because in my consulting group, we target a selection like a POC, right? We don't do full deployment across the customer. We work with other elements of Microsoft to branch that out and build that out. So yeah, if we're just going to target, let's just call it 15, 20, right? And that can be across multiple data centers, different roles like an Exchange on-prem here and a DC over there and a SQL Server over there. Then I guess Defender for servers makes more sense, Edward, to your point. Yeah.
Well, no. Let me go back.
Okay.
You said Defender for servers, or you saying Defender for cloud and then servers, right? Defender for servers.
Just the MDE on servers versus onboarding these on-premise servers to Defender for cloud.
Okay. Deploy onboard MDE.
Yeah.
Use the deployment methodology that they have, GPO, right. Intune, System Center, Endpoint Manager, whatever we're calling it now.
Not Endpoint Manager anymore. We can't use Intune for servers though, right? It would have to be GPO or something, or Config Man. They've got Config Man.
You can use MDE attach, right? So you can't use that for ASR rules, but you can use GPO or a backup method for that. But that's really our deployment standard now, just because it works great. It's GA, clients love it, and it's the most comparable thing to replacing that agent-based solution.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. That's a good suggestion. I actually forgot about that. So thank you.
All right. Yeah, and then I want to ask you about a certain client here in Atlanta, Brody, after the call.
I know who you're talking about. Yes, let's move on.
Hey, can I mention real quick before we hit our guests, because I want to bring them on, because I'm actually pretty excited to hear what BlueVoyant is doing these days. I remember sitting with them about 2 years ago. Vincent, were you in that call with Milan and yourself? We were talking about you're just starting to think about Sentinel, potentially managed service stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were in that call or not. So anyway, I just want to note, despite travel budget restrictions at Microsoft, I just want to note, I'll be in Cleveland next week. I'll be in Houston the following week, and then Orlando. In case anybody wants to meet up, maybe we can have a meet up there or something.
I can't meet you in Ohio, like I told you. I'll come to Houston.
Okay, Houston will be good.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Hey, before I forget, big shout out to Caleb, my buddy at BlueVoyant. We go way back.
Oh, nice.
And big shout out to BlueVoyant. I've had 2 interactions with them within the last 3 months. They were a host partner for my team in Reston. I got to meet a lot of the BlueVoyant and Mannon Sentinel individuals. We were very, very sharp. And then we had a global GBB breakout in Redmond, and BlueVoyant had the best after session party. There you go. and I ran into Caleb again. He's like, Ed, I'm like, I'm not one of those guys that fake, man, you look different. Who are you? He's like, Caleb. I said, hey, you grew a beard. But I met you don't have any hair on your face. And he worked at a partner that I used to do security enablement. So thanks, Caleb and Jessica, for getting our 2 guests on. Rod, if that's all, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests.
Wait. I'm just kidding. Yeah, go ahead.
You had me.
I mean, all I need is the lions and the elephants. This is a circus, man. I tell you what. So, to our listeners, viewers, and supporters, we have 2 guests from a top security practitioner, partner, managed security solution partner. I don't like the word provider. One of the top Sentinel integrators and co-partners that I know of. I recommend them all the time. BlueVoyant. We have Vincent. Vincent, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name because Brody and Rod would make fun of me. I have a problem with names.
Now I need you to give it a shot. Now you need to try. I need to hear it.
Yeah, let's roll the dice.
Yeah.
Your name is Vincent, and that liquor you use to make tequila sunrise.
Close. Depending on what they sell in Ohio, it's pronounced D'Agostino. But the apostrophe throws everybody off. It's D'Agostino is the easy way to pronounce it. Yep.
D'Agostino. Is it D'Agostino? Well.
Yeah, I think technically it's supposed to be D'Agostino, but I think my parents, in an attempt to desperately assimilate as quickly as we could, we just dropped the fancy D'Ag and just went D'Agostino. Mm-hmm. Plus, if you're anyone listening from New York, there's a famous supermarket here in New York, D'Agostino's, which is actually in the Spider-Man movies. If one of them, he jumps on the D'Agostino sign. I have no affiliation. I wouldn't be here talking to you guys about sensor rollouts if I was connected to the D'Agostino fortune. But it's pronounced the same way, D'Agostino.
Okay, and we also have Eric Mannon.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, you got it wrong.
I say at the end of the show, Ed has to go back and pronounce these again.
Yeah, we can do
All
that.
right. Yeah.
Well, okay. Eric, how do you pronounce your last name?
Mannon.
We're just taking our time, Edward.
Yeah,
Mannon.
Just like Canon, but with a M.
Yeah.
But I'll answer to anything. I kind of grew up. It was always Manning, right? Unfortunately, kind of like Vinny. If my last name was Manning, I probably wouldn't be here. So it didn't work out that way.
You'd be making commercial for betting establishments. Yeah, I get you, man. And playing football.
Or be on the Manning cast on Monday nights. That'd be fun.
Yeah, actually, all right. I like them. So let's get into it. This is one of our, more, shows that we do a lot of presentation if the customer wants to. If the guest wants to. So let's give these guys time. So Eric and Vincent, introduce yourself, and you have the floor.
Yeah, sure. I'll start off first. Vinny D'Agostino, head of digital forensics incident response at BlueVoyant. Been at BlueVoyant for one of the founding members. I've been here for 5 years. We're a much smaller part of what some of the wonderful things that BlueVoyant's doing in terms of security and prevention. I get to deal with all the clients that don't follow the good advice and don't do the things that we were just talking about before the show started, don't implement properly and get breached. And so we get to do the breach responses. So we do dozens and dozens of breach responses each year. The majority of which are usually ransomware cases. That's probably where we're spending most of our days. Prior to that, I was over at the FBI for 11 glorious years as a special agent, and then a practicing lawyer before joining the FBI. So that's me in a nutshell. Eric?
Hi guys, my name is Eric Mannon. I'm one of the technical product managers on the Microsoft team at BlueVoyant. I'm primarily responsible for our MXDR initiatives and kind of maturing that practice. Before BlueVoyant, I worked for another MISA provider, so I've kind of been a member of the MISA community since day one, and kind of came up through the infrastructure ranks, got into cybersecurity about 10 years ago, and figured out this was my calling, and this is what makes me happy.
Eric's a genius, by the way, so don't let him fool you.
Are you a genius too, Vinny?
No, but I'm going to find a way to get him on my team. That's how smart I am.
Excellent. So, that's good people management skills right there. Yeah, absolutely. Welcome, gentlemen. That's great. Edward's talking on mute. There you go, buddy. Oh, yeah, long week for Edward. No.
Yeah, he's still talking.
Put the boom down, Edward, and click the button. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. You got it.
Yeah, the boom is there, and you're right. I'm goofy from the run. I've had a cold all week. You're right. So but anyway. So, gentlemen, thanks for the introduction. What are we here to talk about today?
Whatever you guys want. Relationship problems.
It's gonna be one of those podcasts.
Yeah. No, I think
fantasy football.
Yeah, we can work on that. We can fix that a little bit. No, I think one of the things that we were talking about in our prep last week, if I remember correctly, is we're really excited. As you said, we have this great relationship with Microsoft that runs very deep, and as we're growing as a company, we're finding more and more ways that our products and services overlap. And one of the things that comes up frequently is incident response and how that works within the Microsoft suite of services that you provide and products that you provide, and where that overlap is between when an IR happens and how Azure how that can happen within Azure, for example, and how we can do that forensic investigation. So that was my recollection of why I was brought here to talk, but maybe I'm open to anything.
That sounds great. Absolutely. And I know Edward would agree if he could figure out his microphone this week. Just having a struggle.
Still on mute.
Just having a struggle.
I don't know.
Rod, how about you? Do you have any initial questions for our BlueVoyant?
So here's the thing. Yeah, obviously I was going to let Ed go first, but maybe I'll send him.
Well, no, it's fine. I don't know.
Well,
I'll be quiet. I'm struggling. I'm giving too much content and material to Rod and Brody here right now. and this show is merciless. They're bloodthirsty on this show. So
what's Vincent's last name again? Just kidding.
I'm gonna change the spelling on my little moniker there to really trip you up.
Do it in phonetics.
Yeah. So according to Jessica and according to Caleb, you guys were going to come on and talk about your DFIR approach and solutions. If that could be the main topic, as I thought, but if not, tell her whatever that makes Eric a genius. Eric, what are you doing to make you a genius over at BlueVoyant?
Good question.
So, question, can you guys see my screen? That's probably a good place to start.
Not yet.
It looks a little grayed down.
There we go.
There we go. All right. See, I thought there was something wrong with my computer, and I've been troubleshooting. So I'm glad we could do that together.
That's what a genius does. All good.
So I'll go ahead and do a little bit of an introduction, but really what we wanted to introduce just, to the community is a investigation service that's really based off of Azure parts. So traditionally from a incident response and digital forensics perspective, it's normally been very hardware centric, shipping drives to investigations partners and doing more of kind of that traditional IR approach. And what we've been working on for really the last 6 months or so at BlueVoyant is really modernizing that with cloud parts, but keeping all of the excellent expertise that differentiates us from other people in the market. And so really, as far as looking at the types of cases that we end up dealing with, both for managed clients and also for non-managed clients, we're really seeing that ecosystem of cybercrime become more and more available to anybody that wants to pick up a side hustle, right? So whether it's just using generic stuff on GitHub and looking at things on Shodan, one way or another, threat actors are getting in on a more and more regular basis. And it's not necessarily that dwell time of 90 to 110 days anymore. A lot of times, these incidents are closer to 3 to 4 hours on a weekend when the SOC is looking at minimum staff. And so that XDR response with the Microsoft Security Suite really allows us to have that full visibility of both Microsoft native signal, but also third-party signal. And so in our view of the Microsoft solution, we're focused on delivering outcomes for clients. And we really use Sentinel as the brain and 365 Defender and Defender for Cloud as the enforcers that enforce governance, deploy threat protection, and help us respond and remediate threats. And so, I mean, that was a lot said in a short amount of time. I'm happy to answer any questions or just go ahead and hand it off to Vinny.
I like how you said that, though. Defender for Cloud and 365 Defender are the enforcement, right?
Enforcers.
That's probably the first time I've heard that, and I'll tell you right now, I'm going to use that.
Rod, we must be on the same wavelength.
I told you he's a
stealing
genius.
that. He's a genius.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Eric, for making the rest of us sound like geniuses.
I'm gonna give Ross some kudos. This is not the first time I heard it. Rod, you said it, 30 shows back.
Well, I may have said something like it, but Defender is for the policies, right? It's for developing our policies, the enforcement. Yeah, absolutely. I even had a discussion with some Florida Fed agencies this morning about this. So yeah, that's I'm going to use that. I've got it written down.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I would at least mention as well is, kind of a core design principle when we try to develop products around the Microsoft Security Suite is we're not a big fan of, sucking the alerts out of the API, backhauling it to some Elk stack or data lakehouse and saying, we ran really good analytics on that. And, we did a good job here. And here's your ticket, no portal, right? When we work cases and when we push content into Sentinel, we push it into the client Sentinel, and we really approach it from that co-managed SecOps approach, where we're looking at the same analytics, we're looking at the same raw data, we're asking questions about, hey, wait, why didn't this detect this? And really actually trying to focus on that continuous feedback loop. So we want to really kind of empower Microsoft clients in the fabric they've already invested in, instead of make them, come to our fabric.
Everybody okay?
Yeah, it wasn't me.
Yeah, I think one of my kids just fell in the steps. I'm sure they're fine.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure they're fine. That was good. You should have left that on, though. I was kind of waiting for someone to scream out.
That's an experienced parent right there.
Yeah.
I have 3, so yeah.
That's what I was going to say. You have multiple kids. Obviously.
Yeah, nope. I've got backups. So.
Well, yeah. Well, that's awesome. So, just want to ask, because I kind of started this discussion a little bit ago about that meeting we had a couple years ago about Sentinel. It's how does Sentinel fit in this? I'm sure you're going to go into it a little bit deeper, but for those that don't know either, we had Microsoft Ignite last week, and we didn't talk about this during Ignite, but it was announced as during Ignite last week. Microsoft Sentinel is now a leader in the SIEM space after, being, it's a 4-year-old product. It's now in the Magic Quadrant. It's now a leader in the space above everybody else. So it's kind of cool.
That is cool.
How does that affect what BlueVoyant does? Is that something you can tell the customer and it, provides impact for your services, or is it just, hey, that's kind of cool and kudos, we were happy we were there at the beginning?
Well, I would say it's a really nice achievement. Just if you look at like kind of the beginning of the Sentinel private preview, as somebody that basically changed my entire career to focus 100% on Sentinel back in the early days, it's kind of that validation, right? That yeah, I really thought this was going to be the best sim in the market, and it turned out to be true, and it turned out to be true in like 4 years, right?
Once again, he's the brain, right? Yeah, he knew it.
Well, I got lucky on that one. Trust me, I've made a lot of other bad security bets that we won't mention.
I was going to say, have you ever been to Vegas? But I won't ask.
A few times. But I think overall it is really helpful when discussing with management, right? Because, a lot of times that C-suite doesn't have time to get into the finer points of log ingest between, a QRadar or a Splunk or another product and how that's actually going to make the security team better. But if you can tell them that this software as a service SIM is not only really, really popular with the security team because it's the best SIM they've ever touched, but it's also, recognized by everybody else and all of your peers that are buying SIMs, that makes that conversation go quicker.
Agreed. They love the quadrants. Absolutely. They need the quadrants in their lives. And did you see how Eric, the genius, called it a SIM, SIEM, as opposed to a SIEM, CIEM? Just going to call that out there. That's an ongoing security person.
That's a forever debate.
Yeah, I know.
Who calls it? You're not being very inclusive, Brody.
Who calls it a seam? A seam is what's on the inside of your pants.
I've heard it.
I hear it at least twice a week. And then I swear, anytime I'll pick it up in a conversation, someone will correct me and say SIM. I'm like, listen, I just last week heard it 20 times, so I'm just going with the flow.
Azure,
Intra,
Entra.
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
BlueVoyant.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good one.
So let me ask you this. I mean, Eric, the Asnino. So Eric, you sung the praises of Sentinel, and I tried to do the same thing that you did when Sentinel was just a spark in somebody's eye. I got wind of it by a gentleman named Steve Fell and Stephen Walter and Michelle Clash and said, "Hey, would you want to work on this? We're going to build our own scene." And I was like, "See, I said scene, you guys can catch it." Anyway, but I couldn't because my job doesn't allow me to focus on a single product. I got to cover all this stuff. But let me ask you this question: what about Sentinel that you don't like that's still vexing to you to this day? Like, when are they going to fix this?
Spicy question.
The biggest, I guess, struggle for me is actually on the XDR log ingest, right? So that XDR log table that comes out of 365 Defender is what I have found in incident response and actually using these products against threat actors is the best log data for threat hunting and compromise assessments. And it's also really the best analytics for detections in Sentinel. But I still see the vast majority of clients not looking at that data set in Sentinel. And so if you're not looking at that data set, your SIM is not an XDR SIM. It's more of a alert aggregator from different security products. And for me, I don't trust security products. I purple team them. And the best way to really get that next level definition is in Sentinel by ingesting that log data source and, making it easy for clients and financially feasible for them to do it. And so that's why I kind of look at the Azure Monitor agent as the solution that enables us to do that. So we have that full XDR log source on all of our servers and workstations, and we can threat hunt all of them at the same time in Sentinel.
So it sounds like you are saying that this data set, the ability to navigate that is better than Sysmon.
Absolutely. Sysmon is great. That's before I found Sentinel, I found Sysmon. And needless to say, from a tuning perspective, we do have a few clients that do have Sysmon implemented or are using the log analytics credit specifically for Sysmon. There are some very helpful things that you can still use Sysmon for to supplement MDE detections. And so there's still like edge use cases where I really like using Sysmon. It's one of those things from a scale perspective. When you have 250 clients, like getting all of them on a customized Sysmon config is a pretty daunting task.
Mm-hmm. Fair. So, and you know what, Eric, sorry, Edward, there's folks in the chat who are agreeing with your struggle with that log ingestion. And Rod, I'd like to hear your opinion on that and Eric's workaround with deploying Azure Monitor Agent versus just ingesting the XDR log data. What are your thoughts on that? What do you see in your experiences between those two options? And do you agree with them?
Yeah, I do agree with him a fair bit. And quite, honestly, it boils down to how you get that data in there and how you get the data in there best. And those scenarios are going to be different based on the scenario, right? I still think the agent's probably the best way to accomplish that, right? And going forward, obviously, that's going to be the best way to do it anyway.
Yeah, and being able to create custom log tables, it allows you to actually start out this way and then come in this way and go back out that way, right?
Well, and if you create custom logs, you can create your custom ASIM parsers, right?
Yeah.
Of course, you have to know how to do that.
Yeah. So let me follow up with, it sounds like MDE provides pretty good fidelity. Outside of MDE, what else in the E5 security stack brings the next best set of data sets that allow you to be able to make intelligent decisions or say, let's pivot this way? Out of MDO, MDI, Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, and I think that's all, right? What are the other three that you look at and take in consideration in your decision making?
Well, I think from an IR perspective, much like Dart, MDE and MDI are going to be the first things deployed in a possibly compromised environment, right? One of the things that has served me well is, okay, we think we have a security incident. Okay, great. Let's throw an MDI sensor on one of your DCs, and if that thing starts lighting up like a Christmas tree, we know somebody's already running around with a copy of Active Directory, and it's a totally different playbook, right? Mm-hmm. And so MDI is a big player there. I would also add that the MDE network detections that have started showing up with Zeek is beyond critical. Yes. I mean, as far as actually having a chance at seeing, customized Cobalt Strike beacons or Brute Rattle beacons, like it wouldn't be possible without Zeek. So that NTLM inspection is really critical. It's really annoying if you're a red teamer. Quite frankly, 6 months ago, you could run Meterpreter on an endpoint and you would get like 3 or 4 alerts, and now you get like 60. So it's really an incredibly powerful technology that I think we still, as a community, need to do a lot of education and sharing on, just so incident responders see the value. Yeah. But we're definitely already seeing the value.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. We want to get somebody on from the MDE product group in the future, Eric, to talk about that Zeek integration with Defender for Endpoint. And it's just great because I just heard about it the other day. We shared it. We talked about it. I think that was an Ignite announcement. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
it was one of our partnerships. Yep. Actually, that announcement came from the Windows side, which is kind of interesting. But it does affect, right? Because it's going to be built into that in Windows Defender for Endpoint. But
Eric was just saying it's a huge asset for IR, right? A huge asset. So already on the ground, yeah. Eric's seeing like the value of that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that the other acquisitions, well, Zeek is not being acquired, it's just included. But the acquisitions prior, I talked to some of those GBBs, they're loving it. Think about the guys from Risk IQ. that have separated their stuff to ESAM, and then other ones thread and tail. You can feed in IPs that you can see that are beaconing out into your watch list. It's so much possibility now that you have this. So those Risk IQ guys, Eric Snyder, you got to talk about it when you come on next week. Got to talk about it. But go ahead. You were getting ready to say something, Eric. I'm sorry, sir.
Well, and beyond that, I think also, kind of that third one is definitely going to be Defender for Cloud Apps, right? Just because of the visibility we have into Azure AD logs, OAuth registrations, which normally are involved there, and then looking for signs of exfil, right? That's obviously one of those number one concerns besides containment, is trying to determine if anything was exfilled. And a lot of times from an IR perspective, you may or may not have access to the network telemetry at the firewall level or the the proxy level for your investigation. But if you can actually find it in the EDR and don't have to go look through another set of logs, that's very helpful and saves time.
Mm-hmm. Smart. Yeah, smart. Hey, so just building on Edward's question, he loves to hear just when anyone says Defender for Cloud Apps. So thank you for making Edward smile on this very busy week. So I work a lot on both sides of the fence in the Security Center and in the Purview/Compliance Center. Do you find a lot of value in integrating the insider risk management components when you're looking at data exfil scenarios to try to find out if it's inside actor, external actor, that type of thing?
It's normally a different group of investigators or analysts that are looking at those IRM cases, right? So the SOC analysts are designed to hunt and kill malware, right? And human-operated malware. Versus insider risk, really, it requires a different set of skills and experiences. And it also requires that close relationship with internal legal counsel. And so it is kind of tricky to do that as a third-party provider, just because you don't have context a lot of time to be able to resolve or even make recommendations on those cases. And so a lot of times that is actually like the reason why a company would choose to go to somebody like BlueVoyant, because we're going to allow a lot of their security professionals to actually focus on the IRM program, or to focus on, paying off technical debt and re-architecting applications. And we're going to watch, the Defender products and Sentinel and allow them to go home on the weekends, kind of deal. And so that's, sometimes that is the value proposition as far as figuring out a way to do it as a third-party provider at scale. I don't know of anybody that's figured that out in Mesa, but I'd love to find out.
Now, do you find that customers are generally more willing to hand over the reins to everything security-wise, or they just kind of piecemeal certain pieces of it, maybe the hunting or maybe the incident response and things like that?
I think that varies based off of the size of the client. A lot of times the smaller clients are using 3 to 6 man security teams, right? So they'll take all the help they can get. They have plenty of problems and not enough time. And then you also have the larger organizations where they have an existing security program. They have roles, responsibilities, policies, and it's more about how do we fit into their security program with our value proposition and help make their security team better. And so those are the more complicated conversations where, hey, do you want us to do threat hunting on these? What do you want to do on response actions here? Those are the ones that have, those more well-defined requirements.
Yeah, it's a maturity thing, and depending on the company, lots of times we find it's a culture issue, just as much as it is a maturity issue. Meaning, you have some companies that have been around for a very long time that have done things a certain way and believe that they can continue to handle things in-house. And so we find that, of course, one of the best ways to get people to come to the conclusion that they need additional assistance in terms of a more comprehensive layered MSS approach is that they get hit with a monstrous, $20 million ransomware demand, and their network's encrypted. And then the conversation becomes a lot more, it becomes a lot easier to discuss. Okay, where are you short in terms of technology, in terms of your staffing, in terms of your entire approach? So I found from our side of it, on the IR side, we have a lot of people that become much more amenable to the discussion of post breach as to what else they could do in terms of having assistance outside of their company. Whereas when we have the same conversation sometimes with the client prior to a breach, they can be much more resistant to that conversation because of just a culture that they have, that they think it's a difficult thing because they have people telling them, the C-suite executives what they want to hear many times in terms of their posture, and then they get hit and they're shocked that this could happen. But that's the reality of it as it plays out. And then during your post-breach investigation, when we get down to the real ones and zeros and timeline the actual event, and they find out it happened through an unprotected endpoint that they were assured 1,000 times over they had complete, in total coverage and rollout, or a non-updated one, as Ed was kind of talking about earlier, then it opens the door to a lot of conversations about, well, how, what processes do you have in place to make sure that this is being done? It's not just a one-time deal, as you guys know. Security is an everyday discussion and everyday moving the ball forward. You can't just do something and say, well, now that's done, we don't have to think about it ever again. That's just not the way it works.
Exactly.
It's
so
protected.
Work with customers, yeah, exactly. Well put. And so you work pre-breach, you work with customers on resiliency and establishing processes to ensure that when an event happens, we're minimizing that damage and that blast radius.
Yeah, people say often, what's the number one thing we can do to minimize the cost in the event of a breach? And oddly enough, 9 out of 10 answers we give relate to things that are on the client side that needs to be done in preparedness for that, not on how great of a company we are as BlueVoyant or as an IR team. We're ready to go. We barely sleep. This is like my third energy drink of the day. We're ready to go. What we find is the bottleneck invariably comes from the client side. And I analogize it to, how can I make sure that when this hurricane hits us, we're prepared? It's not going to be relying on FEMA. That's not a good plan. Like it's what's your food storage? What's your water supply? Do you have a generator? Is it gassed up? Have you started it in the last 5 years? And so all of those things on the company side, on our client side, unfortunately, if companies aren't taking that stuff seriously, and then when it hits, let's say you're talking about all this data, right? We love data on the IR side, right? That's our lifeblood, is taking these logs that we're talking about collecting in aggregate and doing an analysis to timeline an attack chain to tell you exactly what happened. But if you don't have a way to organize that data, if you don't have a way to get us that data, if you don't have a way for us to view that data, we might wait days for us to be sitting around, twirling our thumbs saying, we're still waiting for this information for you. You might have it. It just might be a complete disaster in how you're storing it, how you're trying to collect and organize it. So if you have that stuff ready, then when a breach happens, even if we say breach, it's somewhat of a, there's so many things that can happen that you don't even know if you've been breached. Like, ransomware being the most obvious, but we deal, oftentimes with clients that are in a pre-breach investigation phase. Something weird happens on the network. Something anomalous happens. We're not even really sure if it's a breach. And so that going through that exercise of saying, okay, this popped up. Why did this pop up? How can this have just appeared out of nowhere? Where else are we seeing it on the network? Is it worse than we think? Is this a precursor to a monstrous attack? Well, that's where the things that you're doing in order for us to say, all right, let's look at A, B, and C data set. If you can have that available for us, or we have even better, if we have access to that data, we're getting you answers within hours, whereas an average client coming to us off the street who doesn't have these services is waiting days, sometimes even weeks, depending on what we're actually looking for.
And how quickly is that discussion about resiliency after they've been impacted by an actual threat, right?
Well, initially it's just survival. We have a client now that's going through a very nasty Black Basta ransomware attack. And I kind of analogize it to the stages of grief that people go through when tragedy happens. And there's there's denial. And then, this couldn't happen to us. And then there's anger. We're not paying them a dime, and then they're slowly moving to acceptance, right? You slowly move, you go through the negotiation process, and then it's acceptance. And then after you've gone through those 7 stages, we can actually sit down and say, okay, so this hurt really bad. The amount of money you just spent on a breach response could have provided protection through a host of Microsoft related products, services, and proactive services that could have saved you. You could have spent this money for 10 years worth of protection so that you would never been in this. And that's literally a realistic number, right? You're talking, especially when you're including in multi-million-dollar ransomware payments. You're talking about years of services that you could have signed up for. And so then it's like, okay, well, what would be really tragic is if you're back in this position a year from now, because you think that because you were hit, that you're not going to get hit again. You might not get hit by that group again for a while, but that doesn't put you on a no hit list for every other ransomware group that's out there.
No pwn zone. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Well, actually, what you've done is just identify the fact that you do pay, right? And so eventually somebody from that group is going to get another job with some other group or something like that, and they're going to remember your name.
Oh yeah, or they break off like we see with Blockbuster being a spinoff from Conti and I think it was Revel. The same people are doing this, so they might go, I have a tip on a company that is a soft target.
I still have a copy of their Active Directory. Let's see if they have the passwords.
And I tell people when I had to do similar to what you guys were doing, I am much cheaper before than I am after.
Yeah,
right. And it's still it's mind-boggling to me that the ransomware attacks keep occurring. I haven't seen a live one in a while, but I'm like, how? With all the technology, like you said, Vincent, how is this happening? Right? Are they encrypting your file storage? Are they encrypting the some of your production servers? So the majority of these ransomware attacks are attacking on-premise resources. You don't see this prevalence in the cloud, do you?
It's both. It just depends on the configuration. So we're seeing it more in the cloud just because people are moving more into the cloud. So it's kind of a bit of a circular logic there, but
taking their bad habits with them.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like you just because as you guys know, just because you move into the cloud, people sometimes think problem solved, but it's just a new set of problems. It's some solutions and then a new set of problems along with it that you have to work to fix. And so, the segmentation, right? So, if you're hosting a server virtually and you have 100 instances running within there, well, then that just means that as a target for the bad guy, they know they can hit one host and accomplish 100x the damage, depending on how you have that configured. And so I think that's the part that people tend to miss. And so the bad habits in terms of how they're protecting, you still see a lack of 2FA enablement. You believe it or not, we still see RDP being used, which, how, right? How is that still possible? We still see that, spear phishing still top of the list. As boring and unsexy as spear phishing is still top of the list in terms of how I mentioned jokingly Quackbot before. Things like Quackbot and Emotet are coming in through spearfish attacks with weaponized attachments. We're still seeing that. And why? Because companies aren't spending any money on training of their employees. And they're in a lot of organizations have, they're dealing with hundreds and thousands of emails per day. And the same person that's been handling them for 20 years, since email was invented, doesn't understand that this could be used in a way that can really, really hurt them. How does something like a wire transfer redirect happen? Forget about ransomware. How does something like a wire transfer redirect happen in the age of where you're communicating with somebody over email and then suddenly it's time to send $20 million. We had this last summer, $20 million loss. And of course, the bad guy was in the environment. They were in the O365 environment for a few weeks now, monitoring this conversation. No 2FA enabled, of course, right? So the tools are there. There's just or improper implementation we see all the time. We had it enabled, but we didn't terminate any legacy connections, or we didn't have it enabled for everyone in the company because a handful of people just hate it. And you can guess who those handful of people are. Lots of times it's the executives at a company.
Right.
And then when it's about time to send the money, nobody picks up the phone and calls and says, we're about to wire you $20 million. We just want to confirm your bank account. And no, they'll just send it. And then the recipient never gets it. And then there's like the, oh crap moment where they say, where's our money? And we go, we sent it last week. And then we realize, how does that still happen this day and age? It's just,
I'll tell you what. Corporate America has become so fixated on productivity and efficiency that they become dumb. The most powerful weapon out there when you're not sure is still this thing. Hey, this doesn't seem like we've done this before. Is this you? No, I haven't seen it. Then we got a problem. Someone's trying to fish me. And fishing is always going to be popular. Fishing for a service is a thing now. Ed needs a new boat. Let me go ahead and stand up my little fishing environment and see what I can do. I don't know, Vince. It is perplexing, frustrating, and I'll tell you my personal opinion. You know, if you listen to some of the shows, you'll know that this is a show of highly opinionated facts. There's no pain, and the pain should start at the top, where especially it's been proven that the executives are negligible in spending appropriately to protect the environment, and there's no backlash. If the worst backlash is you getting fired, right? Because $20 million they're not going to pay. They're just transferring funding money. The consumer of that particular company is going to pay in one form, fashion, or another. And that
or insurance.
Or insurance. But
insurance will pay and premiums go up for everybody. But you just hit on something, Ed, that actually it's kind of funny because you do these cases enough and you interact with these threat actors enough. And one of the reasons that, one of the main reason we get as to why, like, they don't think they're the bad guys, right? The ransomware threat actors don't think they're the bad guys. You know what they think they're doing? Exactly what you just said. They're saying, we're tired of lip service being paid to security. And the only way to get Americans to change their habits is to hit them in the wallet, hit them in the pocketbook. So we're going to hammer these companies who give lip service to protecting data so that they are forced then, they're compelled to change their habits. It's a very interesting argument because
security activists. That's what I want to do when I grow up. Yep.
But think about it. If you're going to recruit people, it's a great way to recruit people because nobody in real life, nobody thinks they're the bad guy, right? Everyone believes that and that's what you do. You recruit people by saying, we're not the bad guy. We're actually making the world safer by punishing these companies that should be spending more on resources to protect their networks.
Yeah, and protecting their customers. See, they don't even care about their customers. They're not putting in the security controls. But you just saw the SEC reporting that they made $4 billion in profit. This thing, they got it. We'll cut them a deal instead of $20 million. We'll cut you $19.9. Right?
And you see it all the time, right? You deal with an organization, that paradox of why do we need to spend more on security? We've never had an issue. It's like, well, that's like circular logic, right? You can't say, why do I need an alarm system for my house? I've never been burglarized. It doesn't mean one necessarily doesn't mean the other. And so companies that have grown, when they're looking at their budgets, one of the things we tell when we're working with a company on a breach response is, and sometimes they can get territorial, and we explain to them, listen, we're not the enemy. We're going to help you because most of the companies we deal with, their security team has been asking for things and hasn't been getting them. And so we can become your best advocate when we do this breach response and we say, hey, remember when your IT security staff said they wanted to move to the cloud and these were the advantages? They were right. Or here's why they wanted to implement 2FA. Here's why they wanted to decommission those old machines that had vulnerabilities that were unpatchable, unsupported operating systems, et cetera. And that we can be an advocate in that way to say, yeah, this is now your comeuppance have come to fruition, and now these things need to change.
Yeah. Well, and there's also a certain amount of empathy that we have to have when dealing with these incidents together, right? Because normally that internal team, to Vinny's point, they know where the holes are, right? And they're not surprised that somebody eventually found them, and everybody gets to suffer together through that whole process, right? They're the ones that are staying up for 48 hours straight, not necessarily the suits. And so it's really important to just be able to help validate their concerns that they probably had, and then document that in a professional way and offer that up to the board so that we can say, yep, it turns out that recommendation was right, and we definitely need to do it 18 months later than we should have.
Yeah. Traditionally, we're reactionary in this industry, or companies are rather reactionary because they don't want to put up the bill. And then, to Vincent's point earlier, the bill comes later and it's 10 times as large, unfortunately. Go ahead, Edward.
And I have to go with Vincent or Eric. You got a staff that's being worked to death, and you still have this lean mentality. But at the same time, you're paying huge corporate bonuses. and there's no appreciation for the security team. In my experience, the thought and the importance of it really does come from not always at the top, but someone who has the ear of those to say, this could go bad. Not saying that it will, but if it does, it's going to go really bad. And I think that it is a lot of organizations still see security professionals on their payroll as a liability because you can't prove your efficiency. It's hard to prove the effectiveness of security.
It's like the early days of being an IT pro, right?
Right.
Same concept. Yeah.
You're a cost. You're not seen as a business.
Yeah, you're a cost center, and right. And as long as nothing happens, it makes people go, well, you obviously don't need anything more. Nothing's happened. You're like, no, we've been lucky. We've been lucky up to this point, and that can change in a fraction of a second. And when those things aren't there to protect your network, then you become unlucky. It's not like it's a gradual thing. It literally can happen it can happen from a vendor you're dealing with who's hit with a massive attack. And in part of that attack, their email environment's compromised. And the bad guy actually goes through the emails and sees the communications with your entity and says, here's our next victim, because we see they have the same bad habits as this other. It could literally be that kind of bad luck that happens to you as an organization. That's no control over, but you're in the crosshairs.
Yeah, I had a customer and I was delivery, like Brody. They did something that was at the time I thought was not unique because it had been done in another industry, but it was pretty cool. They paid their security staff a bonus every year, like a safe driver. Nothing happened. We appreciate you guys. Here's a bonus for that, right? And it didn't have to impact their day-to-day P&L because it wasn't part of the base. It was, hey, we've had these things. We had these many minor incidents, medium incident, and major. And based on that, they got paid. And it made them more loyal. They really dug down into it. Nobody was just hitting ignore, resolved,
Yeah.
And the second thing for any of our listeners that are, customers and not practitioners, you really need to look at your approach to how you can handle incidents. You are sadly mistaken if you think you can do it by yourself. If that's not what you do, you cannot do it by yourself. You're going to burn people out. Attrition is going to make you vulnerable.
It's not even a skill set. I mean, honestly, it's like, you could do basic first aid for you and your family, but if you chop the finger off, no one's like, I got this, like that shit. That's the same mentality. Unless you're doing incident response work, like real IR work, real forensics day in, day out, to try to do it in a crisis is insane. I mean, it's just like you're going to learn how to do dead box forensics with when you're in the midst of an actual crisis. That's not the time to do it. The time to do it is either before or after. But at that point, you have to bring in people. And we always say, we kind of coined the expression, the first 72 hours, meaning the first 72 hours post breach, in my opinion, have the biggest impact on the outcome of the case a month or 45 days later, because what's done or not done in that first 72 hours has a ripple effect. So just, we were hit with something, let's wipe and rebuild. You just destroyed so much evidence in that response. Now, when you're talking about exfiltration and the lawyers are involved and they're saying, hey, we have to notify, tell us what was taken. And we go, we'd love to tell you, but the NOS was destroyed. The DCs were destroyed. And so we have very limited information as to what was actually exfiltrated. Now everyone's going, so this just made what could have been a small data mining process and exercise into potentially a much larger one because we have no way to rule out. And so how could anyone know that unless they've been through this 1,000 times, right? Nobody would know that. So that's what we tell people. And going back to the Azure and the sort of what our philosophy has been over the last really 4 years, but focusing very much so in the last year or so, which is as everyone's moving into the cloud, and because we always like to be incredibly quick in that movement in those first 72 hours. The bottleneck being, okay, we have this data, how do we get it? Well, as more people are living in Azure, what we've done is we've built our forensic lab, a copy of our physical forensic lab, which is in Manhattan, but now almost a duplicate copy, a mirror image that exists within Azure now, moving those tools that we need to do it to say, all right, well, we can attach storage from your environment. move that into our lab in a matter of hours instead of days now, and start that analysis with those industry accepted tools to determine things like root cause and data exfiltration, it can be a real game changer for people looking to move through a breach as quickly and comprehensively as they can without saying, okay, let's dump an EO1, drop it in the mail, or upload it to share file, which we can do and has to be done in certain instances. But it no longer, if you're living in Azure, it no longer is necessary to do that way, because we can provide that solution for you within the Azure ecosystem.
Yeah, and I think I think it's counterintuitive for customers to believe they could, especially when nefarious security actors are teaming up. They got shift work.
Oh yeah.
They're like Cisco TAC. They chase the sun. All right, who's coming on? They have some of the best shift turnover than you probably can imagine.
100%.
And
it's organized crime. It's organized crime.
It's organized crime.
It's new crime. Yeah. Before I did cyber at the FBI, I did Italian organized crime the first 7 or 8 years I was there, and the parallels between what I'm seeing in cyber organized crime is striking. It's just a different breed of, as old organized crime dies off and La Cosa Nostra dies off, this is what the new La Cosa Nostra is. It's these ransomware groups that have the advantage of being highly anonymous and incredibly difficult to get attribution and arrest and prosecute. I mean, they're in non-extradition countries. They're operating through layers of anonymity through Tor, which we had some really phenomenal cases we did while at the Bureau involving, takedowns of, Silk Road and other sites like that. But cool. to expect the Bureau to do that day, and those cases were difficult for us when we did the takedown for Silk Road 2 and Operation Animus, which was like 300 Tor hidden services. That was like an all hands on deck resources type of thing for the Bureau. If you think as a company, you getting hit with a ransomware case that your solution is going to be, let's go to the FBI and they'll get attribution and arrest. It's just not possible. It's just, there's too many cases like that. There's just too many instances like that for the Bureau, for the FBI to be able to even handle, even if they could. And it's very technically challenging to do. So this shouldn't be an advertisement to get into things like ransomware, but you could see why people do and are drawn to it, because as Eric was saying, imagine you're 20 years old and you can make an additional $150,000 this year, by jiggling handles on networks and just turning over credentials to another group of people who say, okay, here's $50,000. And you can morally say, well, I didn't really do anything. I just jiggled the handle and opened the door and I didn't really do anything. So you can sleep at night. And now you're $100,000 richer. It's not a problem that's going to be easily solved as compared to traditional organized crime, which most people would say, I wouldn't even know how to get involved in that. This is something that you can get very easily involved in.
How did you make that transition? I could talk about this with you the whole time. We're running out of time, but like super quickly, how did you, Vinny, make that transition from organized crime to cyber crime and then eventually into BlueVoyant, and then super quick right after Vinny, Eric, I'd love to hear how you got into cybersecurity.
Yeah, we have a question on YouTube from DR, and I want to mention him because he asked this anyway. So this really leads into that, because we talked earlier about, and Eric talked about those file sources and the evidence, people trying to destroy evidence by, wiping everything. I've been in IT for, 35, 40 years, something like this. And we're looking at the exact same logs we looked at all along. We're just looking at them for different perspectives. And I tell this to people all the time that are, working in Intune, Endpoint Manager, things like this. They're always asking, how do I move into security? And I'm just like, hey, just look at the logs from a different perspective. But a lot of people are really interested in getting in the security industry. So how did you do this, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so much more well-defined now for people that want to get into this. I mean, first of all, YouTube. Like, the world of information is out there. There's free tools everywhere. If you're someone who's genuinely interested in this, you don't have to spend $1 or a dime. Start to watch YouTube videos, start to download tools and play around with malware on a segment of your network, your home network. Don't infect your entire house. But you can do a lot. And then once you start, if you really have a passion for it, the programs that are out there at the undergraduate, graduate level are insane. And so, sky's the limit. But if you're really interested in that kind of thing, there's no shortage. The government stuff is really interesting for people that if you're looking to go into cybersecurity, that's been a real sore spot for the government, because trying to recruit people with those types of skills and keep those people there when there's the competition in the private sector is such that not only from a compensatory perspective, money wise, but even just there's so many cool jobs in the private sector. Like the one thing the FBI or DOJ has when it comes to investigating anything is that you can't do it anywhere else. You mentioned the organized crime thing. Like that was something that I became enamored with at a young age. And I can't work organized crime at IBM. Like I can't go to Google and be like, where's your organized crime group? They don't have that. But the FBI has that, right? And they're the premier agency to work Italian organized crime in New York City. Where else can you get that experience? But that's not true of necessarily for cyber. You can do some amazing things at the Bureau. I mentioned, those takedowns of Operation Animus and Silk Road 1 and 2 and all these Mount Gox. I was very lucky to get involved in those investigations, and those things are really 1 in a million type cases, but there's some really great, when I was working Zero Access with Microsoft back in 2012 or 13, right? There were people at Microsoft working phenomenally hard and doing some incredibly cool things. We went to Redmond to collaborate with them on that. And I was blown away. I'm like, so you could work at Microsoft and be tackling this issue from a totally different side and be completely fulfilled in what you're doing. That kind of like blew my mind, because up to that point, that was when I had just moved over to cyber, that kind of opened my eyes to the possibilities in the private sector. So to answer the original question about getting into the organized crime, I came in under law and cyber into the Bureau. But the cyber program at the time was still developing, and it was a focus on copyright infringement and child pornography, which was not an interest. I didn't, not to mention all the bootleg DVDs I had of my own at the time. I didn't want to, arrest myself. So I didn't want to work copyright infringement cases. So I focused on volunteering for Organized Crime Squad. So I was lucky enough to get recruited or drafted, as they say, onto the Organized Crime Squad. But 7 years into that, cyber blew up at the Bureau in a really positive way. So there was 2 individuals that I was friends with through other things we were doing. That was Milan Patel and Austin Berglass. And Austin was the ASAC. So he's kind of the ASAC of the cyber division in New York. So when that violation started to get really mature, and they were like, we need people to come over and with investigatory experience, real actual, locking people up and putting big cases together, but with a technical background, because I came in under a technical background. That finally was like the perfect fit for me. So when I went over there, it was like all the pieces kind of locked into place, and it was like, oh, I get to investigate cool cases, also use my technical background, also use my legal background. And then how many years later, I guess was probably 2015. That's myself, Milan, and Austin were the 3 that left to go over to actually become 3 of the founding members of BlueVoyant. So kind of we all left together, realizing that there was such great opportunity in the private sector, that what if we built something really cool that helps, like I was talking about the Zero Access, it just helps from another side, right? Instead of going out and arresting people, we'll work on protecting people from these horrible things from ever happening. And so it just seemed very natural when it happened. In hindsight, it was crazy, but as it was happening, it just seemed like a logical next step for where we would want to go and say, hey, let's go back to the private sector and actually protect people from the other side and walk away from the arresting, part of it. Especially with how complicated these cyber cases are, it's really hard to find and arrest these people. I mean, it's getting harder and harder. The technology is outpacing law enforcement, dramatically. So it becomes harder and harder to actually put handcuffs on people.
Well, it's outpacing all agencies.
Everybody,
NSA, cyber, FBI, whomever. And it goes back to what you said, Vincent. We had Vishal on the show several back. We talked about, security in the federal space, compensation, working 80 hours a week for 100K versus 8 hours a week for 250 in the commercial sector. You can work me 8 hours. I'm good. You could do that. And it's hard. And you think it would be a no-brainer, especially if you're bringing individuals who still have an amount of patriotism in them if they're separating from the service, who have the skill. But when they come out, it has to be more than there's a guaranteed job for you in the government space. When someone like your company say, how much they offer you?
Yeah.
I tell you what we'll give you, right?
Yeah.
There's no easy fix for it. I don't know. We talked about it. Big shout out to Michelle. Come back on the show. It is what it is.
The most logical fix is to offer, in my opinion, again, and I still, obviously have tons of friends still at the Bureau, and lots of times we refer cases back to the FBI, incident response cases where we think there's actual attribution and a chance to arrest somebody. And I think the answer is you have to offer something to people that they can't get someplace else. And so, you're not going to be able to compete with a Google or a BlueVoyant salary-wise. Everyone knows that if you're working for the government. But what you can say is, we're going to put you in a position to work once-in-a-lifetime type cases. The hard part for the government is getting out of their own way to continue to offer that so people will go. In other words, like those cases that I was talking about, there's so much risk for the agents working those types of cases. You're doing things that are so far ahead of what the government's like comprehension is of, like when Silk Road started, it was a drug case. It's not a drug case. It's a cyber case that they're happen to be selling drugs, right? So if the agency doesn't understand that, you're already off on the wrong track. And so what the FBI and other agencies need to do is put the agents in a position to say, you can come and work these phenomenal cases and we'll support you in every way we can. Now you've given them something they can't get anyplace else. But without that, if you're going to say you're going to come in and be a pencil pusher and work a desk, well, I can go work a desk, like you just said, for twice as much money. So why don't I just go do that someplace else?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how they fix that.
And last thing, I know we're running out of time on that topic, not to beat a dead horse. And when I can make this money, why would I come and work in this when you're not necessarily going to use bleeding edge technology? I'm going to quickly have my skills antiquated. I won't be able to get a job because we got to go through procurement, got to go through Congress, got to get approved, got to go to budget. Everybody gets their bite off the ham before you get it. And by the time you get down to the worker bees, but my answer is all the old age thinking, everything from the military to the agency, the asses need to be out. They're still so stuck on this right here, on power, favors, process to keep them in power. You got to get some young people in there, man. We're aging out. We're just
100%. We used to Austin, who was my boss at the Bureau and came over to BlueVoyant together. We always joked because he was a military guy. It was like sometimes you felt like you were moving, at like the speed of a jet, and the rest of the people are moving at the speed of a tank. And you're like, this is really difficult when you're like, hey, we need to work up the probable cause for the search warrant. And the process and the machinery, the government is like, oh, yeah, it'll be ready in a month. You're like, this server will have moved to 3 different hosting providers by then. So what's the point of it? So we have to have a solution for that, right? And if you have prosecutors that are not technically trained, they don't know what you're talking about. You're like, oh, this is what we believe, and these are the IP addresses, and this is how we know from the traffic coming from this individual's house or location and why we're correlating. And they're looking at you like, we have no idea what you're talking about. That's a problem. So if you can't provide that for the agents that are technically oriented, they're going to leave very, very quickly. They're going to say, what is the point of this? I'm kind of, feeling underutilized and wasted here. And to draw on your analogy, Ed, when I first got to the Bureau, we had the coolest tech. We had these recording devices that we were using that were specially designed. By the time I left organized crime, the private sector had caught up where I was going out and saying, I don't want to use the government's recording devices anymore for my sources. I want to buy them from private sector because they have better stuff now. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely how quickly that happened. So,
because we got bots all over our stuff. We got to lock this down. It must be time for us to go.
Yeah, looks like.
But you're right. It's there is no incentive for the government to move fast or agency. In commercial, profit. You want to be leading market leader. I want to destroy the competition. But hey, we are up against it. We have to let Rod do the out, and we got to talk about some Microsoft Learning Pass. Rod, the floor is yours.
So instead of highlighting a very specific Learn module this week, what I wanted to do was kind of focus more or less on the Learn modules or the live learns that were presented last week at Ignite. So I don't have anything really to show except If you attended Ignite last week and you missed some of these virtually, or if you attended in person and weren't able to capture these, just go look for the Learn Live sessions, particularly the security ones on the Ignite site. You can go through these things. If you're not familiar, we have a bunch of Learn Live sessions on, used to be called docs.microsoft.com. Now it's learn.microsoft.com. This gives you some awesome learning. We've talked about learning and how people, right, get into the security space. We've talked about learning. This is a great way to do it. I think last I count, we had like 675 different Learn modules. So you can learn anything you want to get into the security space. These Learn Live modules literally walk you through. You have hosts that walk you through the Learn Live module. So by the time you get to do it yourself, you completely understand and you're familiar with what the topic is. So like I said, check out the Ignite site, go look for the Learn Live in the catalog. Everything should be available to view and replay now.
Yep. And don't forget, even though we're a security show, don't forget to download the Ignite Book of Business. It talks about all of the announcements that were made, security, info, cloud, everything.
If you go to aka.ms/msignite Book of News, all one word, you can
Book
get
of News.
Book of News. All right.
Super cool.
Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and close the show out. We really thank our guests, Eric and Vincent, for coming on. Out of proper respect, I won't try to butcher their last names, even though I'm being goaded into it. I will not do it, right? And thanks so much for you guys coming on. I've been a fan. I was a fan of BlueVoyant. I was a fan of Mannon Sentinel. I know all about how you guys came together. And I like to tell everybody, what is BlueVoyant's superpower, in my opinion? They are heavy developers in DevOps. They're not very manual. When they do something, they do it at scale. So when you're choosing a provider, look at their processes, right? I've seen the portal. It's top notch. They have very few competitors in my book, right? So continue to do the good work. I'll continue to bring you into my customers. And as long as you guys keep, having good parties. I like parties.
Sounds great. Have a good week, everyone.
Have a great week, everyone. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Vinny. Take care. Oh, by the way, Frank, we need to get like an ending audio thing for our podcast.